Hey folks, and welcome to another video from aplaintruth.info. I had a very interesting morning this morning. I, Deborah, Tavares, and a few other activists descended upon this meeting with all the senators of California and supposedly our representatives to discuss the future rebuilding and talking about who's going to be liable, and we don't want to point any fingers, but we want to get to the bottom of it. And they were taking to task the California Public Utilities Commissioner, or chief as he calls himself. And, you know, it's just a bunch of Delphi techniques, as Deborah's going to get into. But if you want to go straight to Deborah's interview at somewhere around the 18-minute mark, where she comes in and discusses with us after the event what was going down in there. And I want to give you a little insight as to how the workings were going on here. They talked about 5G. They talked about clearing because it's a directional and they can't have a line of sight. So they have to get the 5G in. What that has to do with rebuilding North Bay, well, they made it a focus, as you'll hear in a little snippet here I've included. But after the snippet, we get into an interview with a really wonderful, courageous person, Sara Bass, who talks about her being a targeted individual being run off the road for speaking out about the Las Vegas massacre and what was going on in Santa Rosa as well. So after these little short 4 or 5 minutes of Senate baloney going on and back and forth with the Public Utility Commissions, it's Sara Bass with me and Deborah Tavares. Please leave your comments. I want to hear what you guys have to think about this. Deborah Tavares, we love you. Here she is down talking to Council Member Hill, and she is challenging him. We'll get the microphone on what she's saying later, but she's just wonderful here, getting in people's faces in the power structure and challenging them. Thank you, Deborah.
The bottom line is this: I don't think time is on our side. And what the governor said, I think 2 or 3 times yesterday, and I'm going to paraphrase, you can fight Mother Nature, but Mother Nature will always win. We know that the disasters that we've had continue to stare us down because it's going to happen again. We're going to need to be able to figure out an ability to be able to advance reforms in the coming months. To be able to talk about how we can move reforms that will protect our communities, because it's not just about new development. Coffey Park is 2 miles into the city. If you live in Larkfield or if you live in Coffey Park, what you always thought, if I just had a conversation like this last night, we always thought we were going to be hit with an earthquake. There's no way in hell that we thought that 1,300 homes would be burned down in Coffey Park. It was impossible. There's no wildland interface. It's across 6 lanes of a highway, and there's a lot of pavement in between Coffey Park and where that fire came from Calistoga. So I think that the reason I advance that is understand that you're very focused, and I appreciate that, on the wildland fire interface and development within those zones. Where I think our new normal is the size and scope, the severity of those wildland fire events now are coming in and threatening entire cities that would just 10 years ago would have never thought an incident like this could happen. It would be a plan.
So I'm going to separate some of the challenges into different buckets. And one is that we have a really weak and inconsistent regulatory oversight of telecommunications. So anything that's done by a cable company generally is governed by DIVCA, which is essentially a registration program. They pay us $1,500 a year, and that's it. Some of the legacy telecom providers that have a historic monopoly, but which is no longer in effect because of changes in federal law and federal preemption at the FCC, we have a little more weight over them, but not a lot. The reality here is that the telephone providers and the cable providers both provide the same services under different laws. They provide phone service, they both provide entertainment content, and they both provide internet service, but they're all under different rules. Then you have some small phone companies that are fully regulated because they get a state stipend to support the services to these large rural communities. The nexus probably of all of this is that they're on poles. And the question is, how do you armor those poles because undergrounding, you know, in a rural area, maybe as cheap as $1 million a mile. Urban settings, $10 million a mile. And undergrounding probably undercuts the next 5G technology. But given that most people don't have landlines anymore, probably about 80% of the population just has cell phones, that really calls for attention to both fiber to and electricity service to those poles. We've had some discussions with OES, with whom we have a memorandum of understanding. Their priority currently is to really come up with a redundant system for emergency operations communications. The challenge of trying to come up with a really resilient and strong system on those 200,000 miles of poles that go through those fire hazard areas, it sort of beggars me. I will say that one of the things that I expect at some point here is we start to see the emergence of 5G technology, very high-speed, fast broadband. That's a broadcast technology. You can't underground it. Those places where we've undergrounded electric wires and communication wires are probably going to be the hardest to actually get 5G. So if you live someplace in a slightly rural area and you have an autonomous vehicle, and all of a sudden you hit the limits of that system, you're going to be pushing your autonomous vehicle up the last 2 miles to your driveway. I expect that these are going to be those same tensions that I pointed out to you between the desire to move further out, the desire to have phone and electricity, and the inherent hazards. So we struggle with this. The 300,000 steel poles that utilities have been installing to carry their distribution and transmission services and are mostly in high fire hazard, high wind areas. That may be part of the solution. They're not perfect solutions, but they're probably better solutions. But again, 4.2 million wooden poles and 200,000 miles in the high hazard fire zones. The cost starts to be an issue.
It's January 26th, I believe, Friday. We've just gotten out of the council chambers of Santa Rosa. I'm Jamie Lee with repeditly.info, and I have a very, very wonderful person here, Sara Bass, and she's got an amazing story to tell. But first we want to get into a little bit what we just encountered with this Delphi meeting where we had council members, state senators, McGuire and Dodd, and generally some FEMA people in the audience. We noticed a lot of security. They did allow us a moment to ask some questions, and both Deborah Tavares and I both got to ask some questions, and then they filled it in afterwards, some Delphi people asking very innocuous questions, and then we just got out of after 2 hours, and the California Public Utilities guy went on and rambled for 30 minutes to use up all the time, so maybe the questions can't be answered by the people. They present it as a forum to announce and to allow the people to speak, and then they use it all the time, so we don't get the voice very much. But we did get a little bit in, and Deborah's inside doing some interviews and some really great work. But I wanted to just talk a little bit about what Sara just saw, because she's been active as well. And so what was your takeaway from this 2 hours we just saw?
It was crazy. It felt like we were in a room full of mafia people. Saw a lot of suits, saw a lot of security, and like Jamie said, they ran out the clock, so nobody could really ask questions. They gave a few people very short time frames to ask questions, but they made that, they didn't allow many people to ask questions, and they only gave them 1 to 2 minutes, and that was it. But we're familiar with that because of the SB 277. They did that to us in Sacramento, so they did that to us also. That was done to some activists in San Francisco with SB 18. So that's what they do, the Delphi technique. So.
Yeah, and what we noticed was also that their language was conflicting. Some are saying there was no winds caused the fire. Other ones saying the winds caused. They said they're there to find out, get to the bottom of who's liable for this. And then Senator Dodd gets up and talks, and he says, well, we're not here to point fingers. This is all part of the Delphi technique, folks. Nothing gets done. They're going to do their agenda. We just had one lady from some European country, Eastern European country, speaking, and she asked for a break for 2 minutes after we've been sitting there for 2 hours, and everybody allowed her to break so she could get her line. So when she came back, she was not sure, I think, what she was supposed to say.
Yeah.
This is all part of the Delphi technique of what they did.
Yeah.
They talked about organizing a Forest Service task force. They talked about more regulations. They talked about the telephone poles, and they're trying to finger PG&E. And I was able to call out the fire chief and say, you guys even know 100 days later what even caused it. How can you talk about the liabilities? So we are able to get a little bit of a voice in, not much, but this is all part of the Delphi plan, part of Agenda 21. We did bring up the resilient cities. They have a rebuilt city department right here now, where they're all getting Delphi. They're all getting put into Agenda 21 boxes. They're all getting put into these. They're never going to move back into their homes, and they're going to extend. It's going to be, the fire chief said, Chief Ken Pimlott, it was going to be another 3 months of investigations to try and figure out what the heck happened.
And they said that it's going to happen in the Sierras. So they're calling out the Sierras.
Wait, let's get into that,
Yeah.
because this was Congressman McGuire, and it was very important what he said, and how they slip it in, and we got it on record. I've got it on film, and I'll post it a little later. But, excuse me for interrupting,
No.
but Mr. McGuire, he stated that it is eventually an immediate concern that the entire Sierra Nevadas is going to cause a mass disaster of a fire that cannot be controlled. His words. I paraphrased a little bit, didn't get exactly right, but Sarah, wasn't that about what he said?
Yes.
And then he went on and on. So is it a prophesize? Is this predictive programming? Is he projecting out? Does he know something? Well, we weren't able to ask those questions, but
No.
this is the kind of stuff that went on, and they were just blowing smoke up our butts. That, hey, we're here for the people. But if you look at Rebuild North Bay, it's all about rebuilding the businesses. I did bring up about James Lee Witt, who's a former FEMA director, ex-FEMA now with C Corp. DeWitt O'Brien made $18 million third quarter and profiting from disaster, and now they're going to be profiting from that as well. So he's also partners with Darius Anderson, the owner of the Press Democrat, who named him to run the rebuild. So we have a federal agent being named by a newspaper guy who has much extensive business with Kenwood Investments and Treasure Islands and things like that. So, we just wanted to bring up the players and who's involved. And just show you that it's all about, right hand, left hand show you they're doing good, left hand, they're doing all the sneaky shit behind your back. But we put them on notice, we're paying attention, we put them on notice, we're seeing what they're doing, we put them on notice that this is not something that at least a few of us are not going to stand for, and we're going to speak out and be heard. So I honor Sara and all of you that are here, Deborah Tavares and her husband. They're doing yeoman's work, and we need more and more of you doing that. So I'd like to transition this a little bit, unless Sara, you got anything to say about what you saw?
No, just that the news was here, and as soon as he finished speaking, the two news guys, they said cut his out. So they said cut his out, and then they kept hovering over our shoulders to look at what we were writing and what we were texting. So they were spying on us. They wanted to know what we were writing, what we were texting, and literally said cut what he said at the podium, cut it out of their tape. So it won't be on the news, but of course we know that.
Right, and it's all part of the game. But KTVU, ABC, and NBC, CBS I didn't see, but NBC, the local stations here, they were all there recording this stuff.
Yeah.
As Sara just said, you won't see us, you won't see the real news. You only see what the propaganda news is coming out. So, Sara, I want to switch gears a little bit. We've been talking, and the three of us here have been attacked with directed energy weapons, with high-frequency microwave HARP technologies. And can you get into a little bit? And I've been attacked as well for my work. I've gotten incidences where I just fall backwards. I fell through a plate glass window, and I read up on Dr. Duncan's book on soul stealers, who worked on this touchless torture work, and he was saying falling backwards is one of their things they do. And also, but you have some attacks that have gone on you just in the past couple months that occurred when you started speaking out against from the Las Vegas incidences, right?
Starting with Las Vegas, and then directly after that, 3 days after that, the fire started. And it's just been one thing after another. It's been searing head pains, ringing in the ears, falling, not having my balance, and then actual gang stalking by people. They've been showing up to where I'm at, saying strange things. It's just been really bizarre, saying things like, we're Sara's gang, like groups of people literally saying that.
Coming to your husband's
Yes, coming to
show.
Coming to
He's a musician.
Yeah, coming to where they know we're gonna be, so they're following us, tracking us, and saying we're with FEMA and we're Sara's gang with FEMA, and saying that. And at that time, I didn't know James Lee Witt. I didn't know anything about him, but I knew. I started researching, and I found out that there's FEMA based out of Camp Meeker. I looked into that, and then I found out about James Lee Witt and how he's with Rebuild North Bay, and then it all started to make sense and why they would be following us and harassing us, is because we're exposing FEMA and exposing
The agenda
and everything, and so it makes sense. They tried to run me off the road one night, coming home from Rona Park, and I'm noticing weird vans following me. I had to deactivate my Facebook account. It's just been really strange. There's been a lot of really strange things happening, and it goes on and on. But
So this has been for like 3 months now?
yeah.
And give me an idea of what started this. You started posting about Paddock and having locations here in nearby in Santa Rosa and Guerneville?
Yeah,
And that's what started it all, you think, on Facebook?
Stephen Paddock's brother, Bruce, has a couple of homes in the Guerneville area. I was posting stuff about that. And connections to different things in Las Vegas that are connected to here, connected to San Francisco.
Bohemian Grove, which is right near
Grove, and all of that. And then literally 3 days later, Santa Rosa started burning down. And then I started connecting all of that to FEMA and the Bohemian Grove and Bechtel and all these corporations that hang out there, and then PG&E and the Rothschilds and Roger Kimmel, and it's crazy how it all is connected.
Right, and Darius Anderson, who owns the Press Democrat here on Sonoma Media Investments with his Bosco boys, Doug Bosco, they tapped, the newspaper editor tapped the ex-FEMA director to make profits from the communities here from the disasters. It's called Profit from Disaster, Disaster Capitalism.
Yes.
They made $15 million, DeWitt's company did, a private company, in disasters in the third quarter, covering Hurricane Harvey and whatnot.
Right.
So this is what they're doing here, and they're making great money off of us, and while the people are not going to be allowed to return to their homes.
And he was called out from Hurricane Katrina. He was called out for charging 3 times what he should have been charging. He was investigated years ago for doing that. In 2007, there was an investigation that they did into James Lee Witt. He was charging 3 times what he should have been charging. He's a fraudster, so.
And he's a Clinton buddy who played Little League with Bill Clinton, so there you go.
Yep.
And then we also have Darius Anderson, who has Kenwood Investments with Treasure Island, a multi-billion-dollar, $6 billion project with partnerships with the largest Lennar homes in the world. And then DeWitt has an E6 visa program, E5 visa program, global E5, E6 visa. Look it up. They're bringing in foreign companies paying $500,000 to $1 million to bring in people to get visas, legalized residences to invest foreigners in U.S. corporations through these disasters. So they're all in bed with each other. Darius Anderson was a lobbyist for PG&E. And now they're trying to blame PG&E because they're going to get rid of all the utility companies that put in the space-based laser programs, and this is part of the reason they're doing all this. And so we're seeing what they're doing and we're documenting what they're doing. I'm not sure what kind of effect we're going to have to affect change, but knowledge is power, and so we're trying to bring to everyone here, this is coming to your communities, folks. This is just starting in these areas, and we're here to document it to help all of you understand in your communities, because you're next. And what Mr. McGuire said, we've got the wonderful Deborah Tavares here, I want to interview her now too, but I want her to comment about what she thought about Congressman McGuire stating that the Sierras are going to be burning down next. Did you hear that comment?
Well, of course, he's advancing the governor's
This is Deborah
talk
Tavares, please,
from stopthecrime.net.
and she's just a hero, folks.
We are going to be
Heroine.
putting what we've heard today up on YouTube so that all of you can see what you're hearing us talk about right now. And what is so important to also add to what Jamie just said about the homogenation that is occurring in our communities with bringing in foreign nationals is that we now know too that Airbnb is Google, and that is also part of the homogenation process globally. The basic mission statement for Google is your home is anywhere and nowhere at all. And so this is huge. We have these enormous corporations splintering our communities and causing mass disconnection. But what we're hearing here in this meeting today with the representatives is they don't represent us. This is literally a script. This is an act.
It's a play.
It's a play,
We're
and they're
Orwellian
getting their
play.
marching orders from corporations that dictate policy, Rothschild and Rockefeller. And I will tell you that the Rand Corporation, based in Santa Monica, California, that has arms in all the countries, writes legislation for Congress. When you look at that website, the Rand Corporation, be careful not to download it and have it on your YouTube channels because they will sue you. But I can tell you, when you read what they're telling Congress, is their reading material for their summer break so that they're prepared to return in the fall with legislation and important issues that they need to get through, you will be amazed at really how this country is being run. We're being run by a Delphi component that literally came from Tavistock. Rand Institute adopted it in the late 40s. Again, home-based
Which
in
stands
Santa
for
Monica.
Research Institute.
Yes, all of the universities are involved as well. There's private endowments. There's Rockefeller and Rothschild. Again, we're going to be covering this specifically on stopthecrime.net and some of the YouTubes that if you subscribe to stopthecrime.net, you will get this information firsthand. But what you do need to know is how government really works, and it's not working for us. We do not have an effective government for the people. This is a corporate nest of corporations that is taking marching orders from centralized script writing and is literally controlling us.
From international organizations. This isn't a community, state, or federal level. These are international organizations that are coming in and taking over with their people.
That's exactly right. You're exactly right, Jamie.
And the other thing is with Google, just to add to this, $499 million or $399 million was the last round of financing to Airbnb by Google. You know, it's all incestuous, folks. They're all doing this game with the home nest and everything, spying on us and all, and will drink the Kool-Aid and invite us in. But they just burned thousands of people out of their homes that are never going to get back to their homes here in Santa Rosa.
They're not, because we attended a fire meeting last night where there were hundreds of fire victims here in Sonoma County attending to find out about their insurance shortfalls because they don't have enough money to rebuild their homes. Many of these people are older people that have lived in their homes, they purchased their homes, they live on Social Security, and one of the things that has happened with the shortfall in insurance coverage is they're going to be required to get additional financing so that they can rebuild. They will not qualify under current loan criteria. They do not have a 1099, they don't have the tax returns that are going to allow them to qualify for the additional financing that they will need to rebuild. These folks, sadly, are suffering from PTSD. They've lost everything, and they're walking through a process that they are not capable of understanding. Not only the insurance process and all of the aspects of going through that process, but also the fact that they are now becoming builders. They're having to figure out if they're going to rebuild. These people are not capable of that information, so they're not understanding what's ahead of them.
With much more regulations of rebuilding, and the fire chief can't even tell you 100 days in of what started these fires, folks. And so the onus is going to be on the people to rebuild, and the cost is going to be so much. With all the new regulations, everybody's got to have sprinklers now, single-family residents. But
and zero net energy.
Zero net energy. You know, they're talking about
energy.
using the burn down trees for energy. You know, they're trying to do all that stuff.
zero net energy is not even possible. And that's according to the Department of Energy on their own website. You don't get energy from a vacuum. Zero is not possible. So what we're seeing here, and what our hope is to articulate to all of you, is that California is still burning. The fires are out, but it is still on fire with resilient regulations from Rothschild. Everyone needs to understand what resilient cities are. This is another horrific undermining of the revenue on top of the CAFR theft that's occurring. But this is a public show that you have been watching when you see parts of this YouTube that we're going to put up in and around this conversation right now. And I spoke directly with the CPUC director, and I have it on camera. I spoke with many of the people that are here today about the not necessarily directed energy weapons, but weather control. And I have them on record telling me that that's of interest and curiosity. So you're going to see parts of this in upcoming YouTubes of what they're understanding of what is happening, because it is happening quickly,
right.
And it's global.
And to bring home what you're saying, and you spoke about it when you talked, and Vice Chairman of Rothschild Inc. is a guy named Roger H. Kimmel.
Yes.
Vice Chairman of Rothschild,
Right.
international investment firm, been in the position of board of directors on PG&E since 2001. Prior to joining, Mr. Kimmel was a partner in international law firm, international folks. Okay, he's also non-executive chairman of board of Endo International PLC, another international global specialty healthcare company. And you were speaking about all the cuts that are going on, which I want you to speak to about the meeting yesterday and all the cuts to the fire and everything that's going to go on. Santa Rosa is going to be decimated, folks. But the other gentleman, losing two.
Well, just to stop you for a minute, this is not just a Santa Rosa decimation. This is a United States decimation.
Right.
Because it's important for everyone to realize that there is an outline of what Rothschild and Rockefeller plan to do to North America. And that is outlined in the Resilient Cities. They have said they are focusing their efforts now on North America in 2018, and they are setting up offices in Silicon Valley. They are ruthless. They are in genocide programs to reduce the population. So I would ask all of you to take a look at what Rockefeller has said about the necessity to reduce the population. These are genocide programs, plain and simple. Climate change does not exist in the modality that it's being presented at these meetings. Climate change is the artificial weaponization of global weather control. And that is what it is. That is what climate change is. And this is genocide, nothing short of extinction. With the 5G and all of the other frequencies that are rolling in, this is absolutely an extinction plan. And I would ask all of you, please, to look up The Cooking of Humanity. It's a very important YouTube to understand the levels of frequencies that biologically we as humans will not survive under. So, Jamie, it's diabolical that we should be here at this time.
It gets even worse.
Oh, and it does.
Here another on the board of directors of PG&E. So PG&E's playing the bad guy, right? So PG&E's are being blamed, but nobody can tell why it happened, how it happened. There's polls that weren't even near where the fire started, yet they're going to blame it on us. Well, guess who joined the PG&E board of directors in May 2017? Wait, let me back that up. Department of Homeland Security Janet Napolitano, after she left the Department of Homeland Security, went where? To the UC Board of Regents. She's running the UC Board of Regents with Governor Jerry Brown. They both went to the Jesuit schools of Santa Clara, just like Trump went to the Jesuit School of Fordham, just like Clinton went to Georgetown. And all the Georgetown Foreign Services schools are run by the Jesuits from there for the military. So here we have how do you say his name? C. Johnson. He's a partner at Paul Weiss, Rickland, Wharton, and Garrison, LLP, another international corporation. Secretary Johnson is a partner with the law firm. He served in 3 Senate-confirmed president appointment as good. Before joining the law firm in January 2017, he served as U.S. Secretary of Homeland Security from December 2013 to 2017. Before that, he served as General Counsel, drumroll, of the Department of Defense and General Counsel of the U.S. Department of Air Force, and Assistant to U.S. Attorney in the Southern District of New York. So he's been a director of PG, and as I said, since May 2017. So here you see the players being injected before the events, and now the events have occurred, and now they're laying out their hand, and we're seeing how they're playing their cards. And I want to give a huge shout out to a local representative who's gone underground for health purposes, Rosa, and there's a very important book called Behind the Green Mask, and it's a very, very important book for everybody. She chronicled what was going to happen, just like Deborah has 5-7 years ago. So, you know, please, everybody, download it so you can understand for yourself.
Well, I know that this sounds very grim, and it is. There are steps you can take. Certainly, I would recommend everybody reduce all of the wireless that they're being subjected to as soon as possible, because literally, the intention for the wireless is to hook up our synapses, because we all have self-replicating nanowires in us. And a simple way to test for that, I learned this from Clifford Carnicom at one of his meetings, is you get this combination light and magnifying glass, and you can hold it on your skin, next to your skin, and you can actually see the opalescent wires in your skin. We've tested this on our family members, we've tested this on other people, we've tested this on fruits and vegetables and our animals. Everything has self-replicating nano wires. The frequencies are going to connect us to a grid with our synapses. We are being turned into cyborgs, those of us that survive long enough for the connection. 5G is prohibited by 3 things, which we heard today at the meeting. They said that country or rural areas are going to be difficult for the connectivity of 5G. Also, vegetation in the IEEE document about understanding 5G tells us that vegetation prohibits 5G from assaulting us. So does rain, so does water. So why do you think PG&E, Rothschild, offered up the idea that we need to cut the vegetation from all the power lines so he can so that the 5G will assault all the people without the interruption of the vegetation? Rothschild has allowed this litigation to move forward to steer people away from the fact that they caused these fires. They're responsible for these fires, and in the emails that you can see and listen to on our website, the plan to burn up Northern California, we have actual emails from the California Public Utility Commission and Pacific Gas and Electric that admit they're going to be using space-based laser weapons on Sebastopol. Sebastopol is here in Northern California, and we have it in writing. It's not a guesstimate. It's not needing to prove that the military has these kinds of weapon systems, which of course they do, but it is
for a very long time. This is nothing new to them.
This is nothing new. That's exactly right. But this is admission. This is documented admission. And so we are in trouble. So we need to get this information out far and wide. You need to disconnect as much as possible from your cell phones, from all your wireless. Again, please watch The Cooking of Humanity. Understand this is global genocide.
5G too. The 5G is a directional system, okay? There's 100 little micro antennas. When you see the cell antennas of 4G, and the reason they did 3G to 4G, because they're releasing just this amount of data, and what they do for efficacy is they measure the amount of penetration, but they don't regulate the duration. Now they're sticking these big, huge 30, 40-foot towers you see everywhere, and they're putting them on telephone poles, as I documented in my video on The Plain Truth. They're right down the road from me. And there's Wired for Scientists down in Bridgeway, Sausalito. We got to get a hold of these guys. They did a presentation in Petaluma with 5G, and they measured the radiation coming off of these new boxes that are coming out, these 4G LTEs they're called, which are going to be converted to 5G. And because they're directional, that's what Deborah's referring to, they have to clear the lands. And the first thing they did out here was they took people's trees and they just leveled them. That was the first action the Army Corps of Engineers did. The people wanted to save the trees? No way. They cut them all down. And so they're clearing everything because these 5Gs are directional. If anything gets in their ways like trees, it blocks their signal so they can't have it. So it's about clearing the land as well. And so what they measured, this Wired for Scientists, I'll try and post that on the website, it's very important. They measured that 3G was this amount, 4G, but the new 5G systems they're coming out with, where 1,000 microwatts is considered dangerous, extreme health hazards, they're measuring 200,000 to 800,000 to 1 million microwatts coming off of these machines, and they're putting them next to bus stops. They're putting them up to battery packs and mailboxes and stuff. They're going to radiate the crap out of everybody. Why? Because it's profitable. They get people sick. They get people to die. But first, they got to get them sick because they're going to make as much money on the way out. That's the game. It's blood ritual, folks. And I'm sorry to have to report this. And I'm very proud to have these two wonderful ladies beside me and give me strength to do this stuff. But we got to wake up.
Well, I would also recommend that everybody watch the Genocide Treaty. It's a YouTube now. You need to understand that all the countries have signed on to mass extinction. This has been approved. And we're not trying to get this information out to you to have you hover in a corner in fear. We're trying to get this information out to you because our parents did not do anything with us as far as informing us. And I will tell you, we have a job to do while we're here to get this information out so that others can have an opportunity to figure out maybe how we can survive. We're smart. We have created and worked for this machine that has created all of these genocide apparatuses. We can turn that around. We can. And that is why you need to know what is happening so that you can help us figure this out. Don't send messages under the YouTube saying, well, Deborah, you're not giving us a solution.
Right.
All of you are the solution.
Amen.
We need all of you to get on board.
Amen.
We can't do your homework assignments for you. We can only be out here in the most horrific, costliest fire in the history of the United States and report to you what we are seeing. We need this to go viral. We need this to go global, and we need everybody to put on their thinking caps to figure out how we're going to survive, because that is what your thinking needs to be. And in the meantime, I would highly recommend that you stop allowing your children to spend hours and hours and hours behind wireless frequency cell phones and gaming.
And there's read-write technology that alters the frequencies of our children's nervous system.
That's right.
Now, when she talks about the self-replicating nanobots, I did a piece on the nanotechnology, this AI that's invasive species. And these things are self-replicating at no cost. That's why they're so advantaged. They came out with GMOs to hide the nanotechnology.
That's right.
Nanotechnology is a $1 trillion business, 50 billion of which is spent in our food system since 2000. So these self-replicating nanobots are getting in our read-write systems, and Deborah and Sara both referred to the neuron synapse replacers, these artificial devices that go inside our brain, right and left hemisphere, and they can literally steer our thinking. They can put nightmares in our brain, and Sara, we interviewed earlier about being targeted and all the things that have been happening to her, and me falling backwards, and you've been attacked, and she got hit by a car, she got attacked by a car as well.
Well, we were told in our car on our way to Bohemian Grove to demonstrate in front of Bohemian Grove. We've also experienced the psychotronic weapons system of putting thinking into your brain, which you believe is your own, and it's not.
Yes.
These are the kinds of systems that are occurring. When people are talking about voice to skull, it's important to understand they are being assaulted by the implementation of a system that is going to be directed at you, not just targeted individuals. This is a global plan for those that survive the onslaught. I would highly recommend that you all read Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars. Understand that is a genocide program and is a war called for against the global population. And the NASA war document is part of the protocol of the declaration of war. So when you look at these two documents side by side, you hear the declaration of war and what they're going to do to us, and they've succeeded. And then you find out through the NASA war plans the implementation and the exact
That's the other
things
document.
they're
The
going to do.
NASA War Document 2025 is another critical document to look at. And also Georgia Guidestones, where someone spent tens of millions of dollars. I actually flew to Everton County, Georgia, to see if it was real, touched it, saw it, and there was serious intention. And the first thing the Ten Commandments say, in the finest granite in the United States, on ley lines of energy ley lines, they placed it specifically there, which aligned with Stonehenge, the pyramids, and everything else, reduced the population by over 95% to 500 million people.
Yes, that's absolutely true. And again, I urge everybody to stay tuned to our channels, our websites. Again, this is Deborah Tavares with StopTheCrime.net, trying to document what you're going to see on the continuation of after the fires are out in Northern California, California is still burning. So I ask you, please go to the website and subscribe and get our most recent YouTubes. Jamie, I really want to thank you for having this little powwow here.
Yeah, no, this is wonderful.
Significant
So
importance.
education is alert. I mean, first you got to educate yourself. Then you can go out and do it. So this is all about getting education. And if you find yourself fear, back off, okay? If you find yourself getting ill, back off. But come back to it and share, because shining light into the dark does one thing. The dark is no longer dark. It's been shined light into.
That's right.
And that's why we have to all step up to the plate. And we are doing this for the future of our children and all life. Life is dying everywhere. The trees are dying, the fish are dying. They don't have crab season anymore. The Chinese won't even buy our crab. I mean, there's no trout in our streams anymore.
There's the poisoning of every delivery system that we
Every
need for
delivery
survival.
system.
In fact, I just want to point out, this is huge. I just saw today that in Cape Town, in South Africa, they are now turning off the water supply.
Yes.
To indicate that they are out of water. Everyone,
I saw
please
that.
go to primarywater.org, understand the truth about water. Water is a renewable. We do not have peak water as they have described peak oil to us.
And scarcity is a scared city. So they get scarcity to scare the cities. And it's the Delphi technique, it's the problem reaction solution, it's the Galilean dialect, where they create the problem, you ask for the solution, hey, give us water, and then they, you know. So,
Well, under the resilient plans, there are the eliminations of all resources for human survival. And that's important to understand, because they are attempting, and they're doing a very good job at privatizing the water supply,
Right.
so that none of us will have access. And that is the plan. We've talked about that. I have many YouTubes up on primary water. Please take a look. There's an excellent YouTube up called Primary Water Explained. And I would ask that all of you understand what happened to Muammar Gaddafi when the UN and the United States blew that country off the map and murdered him. They blew up the great man-made river project, the eighth wonder of the world. Muammar Gaddafi discovered primary water when they were drilling for oil. They put in this amazing plumbing system under this
the best
desert
water
sands.
system in the world.
The best. Delivered
For the people.
for 75% of the people to receive pure, clean drinking water. That was blown up. An insider contacted us and told us also that they blew up all the well drilling equipment that was purchased from the UK because they said it looked like missile launchers. No, they did not want the world to understand primary water. Start to talk to your children. Start telling your children that we're not scarce with resources. They're not going to die because of their existence. It's not killing the planet. What is killing the planet is the false science that we're being fed in the lies of school. So if you do anything for your children, get them out of school.
Amen.
Don't vaccinate them, and start teaching them the things that you're hearing us talk about. They will not survive in a world where they are being programmed with nothing but lies. Why do you think the suicide rate has gone up with children? They don't feel they have a right to live because they're being told they're killing the planet. This has got to stop. We plead that you get this information out far and wide. And again, I want to thank all of you for having me on.
Thank you, Sara and Deborah. And
I've got to get back in because I'm sure that there's more crime to report.
thank you for all you do, Deborah.
Okay, thank you, you guys.
We'll see you. You can cut it
Okay.
if you want. That's what they think of us, folks. Human resources.
All of this is that they're on poles. And the question is, how do you armor those poles? Because undergrounding, you know, in a rural area, maybe as cheap as $1 million a mile. Urban settings, $10 million a mile. And undergrounding probably undercuts the next 5G technology. But given that most people don't have landlines anymore, probably about 80% of the population just has cell phones, that really calls for attention to both fiber to and electricity service to those poles. We've had some discussions with OES, with whom we have a memorandum of understanding, Their priority currently is to really come up with a redundant system for emergency operations communications. The challenge of trying to come up with a really resilient and strong system on those 200,000 miles of poles that go through those fire hazard areas is sort of better telecommunications. So anything that's done by a cable company generally is governed by DIVCA, which is essentially a registration program. They pay us, $1,500 a year, and that's it. Some of the legacy telecom providers that have a historic monopoly, but which is no longer in effect because of changes in federal law and federal preemption at the FCC, we have a little more weight over them, but not a lot. The reality here is that the telephone providers and the cable providers both provide the same services under different laws. They provide phone service, they both provide entertainment content, and they both provide internet service, but they're all under different rules. Then you have some small phone companies that are fully regulated because they get a state stipend to support the services to these large rural communities. The nexus probably of all.
Hey folks, and welcome to another video from plaintruth.info. I had a very interesting morning this morning. I, Deborah, Tavares, and a few other activists descended upon this meeting with all the senators of California and supposedly our representatives to discuss the future rebuilding and talking about who's going to be liable, and we don't want to point any fingers, but we want to get to the bottom of it. And they were taking to task the California Public Utilities Commissioner, or chief as he calls himself. And, it's just a bunch of Delphi techniques, as Deborah's going to get into. But if you want to go straight to Deborah's interview at somewhere around the 18-minute mark where she comes in and discusses with us after the event what was going down in there. And I want to give you a little insight as to how the workings were going on here. They talked about 5G. They talked about clearing because it's a directional and they can't have a line of sight. So they have to get the 5G in. What that has to do with rebuilding North Bay, well, they made it a focus, as you'll hear in a little snippet here I've included. But after the snippet, we get into an interview with a really wonderful, courageous person, Sara Bass, who talks about her being a targeted individual being run off the road for speaking out about the Las Vegas massacre and what was going on in Santa Rosa.
Because it's not just about new development. Coffee Park is 2 miles into the city. If you live in Larkfield or if you live in Coffee Park, what you always thought, if I just had a conversation like this last night, we always thought we were going to be hit with an earthquake. There is no way in hell that we thought that 1,300 homes would be burned down in Coffee Park. It was impossible. There's no wildland interface. It's across 6 lanes of a highway, and there's a lot of pavement in between Coffee Park and where that fire came from Calistoga. So I think that the reason I advance that is understand that you're very focused, and I appreciate that, on the wildland fire interface and development within those zones. Where I think our new normal is the size and scope, the severity of those wildland fire events now are coming in and threatening entire cities that would just 10 years ago would have never thought an incident like this could happen. And would be planned.
So I'm going to separate some of the challenges into different buckets. And one is that we have a really weak and inconsistent regulatory oversight
as well. So after these little short 4 or 5 minutes of Senate baloney going on and back and forth with the public utility commissions, it's Sara Bass with me and Deborah Tavares. Please leave your comments. I want to hear what you guys have to think about this. Deborah Tavares, we love you. Here she is down talking to Council Member Hill, and she is challenging him. We'll get the microphone on what she's saying later, but she's just wonderful here, getting in people's faces in the power structure and challenging them. Thank you, Deborah.
The bottom line is this: I don't think time is on our side. And what the governor said, I think 2 or 3 times yesterday, and I'm going to paraphrase, you can fight Mother Nature, but Mother Nature will always win. We know that the disasters that we've had continue to stare us down, because it's going to happen again, we're going to need to be able to figure out an ability to be able to advance reforms in the coming months. To be able to talk about how we can move reforms that will protect our community.